Good afternoon. Welcome back sa ating OBS. This is now our 70th. We are studying still the book of Luke, or the third gospel of the synoptics. This is now the book of Luke. Let's go over to the book of Luke. And let me just remind you that all our lessons are now in YouTube and you can share it. So just type Brother Ronnie Cariaga and then all of our lessons will be there. So let's start with the Gospel of Luke. There are 40 parables in the Synoptic Gospels. Okay? And all of Mark's parables are shared by the other two writers. 7 parables are shared by all. There are 8 parables that are found only in Matthew. All of Mark's were shared by Matthew and by Luke. But there are 15 parables found only in Luke. And these parables are the ones that we remember, or Luke's parables are most remembered or most quoted. Okay, I'll give you some, just like the parable of the prodigal son, the parable of the good Samaritan. My clicker is not working. And the rich man and Lazarus, the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. So these parables that can only be found in Luke, knowingly or unknowingly, they are our favorite, or as I have put, most remembered, and they are most quoted. Okay, so what make Luke's parables special? Could it be that the topic that he tackles, or the theme that he talks about? Could it be that the characters that he used in the parables, or the German saying of Sitz im Leben, situation in life that he deals with? Could that be one of the reasons why we love Luke's parables, or Luke's parables are special, somewhat special to us? Or that the Sitz im Leben in Luke has its universal appeal? Or could it be that we could see our being stereotyped and our prejudices by reading the parables of Luke, or by reading the book of Luke? Or could it be the lessons learned, or the morals we could get from the parables? I would dare to say that it could probably be the style of writing of Luke, in that he involves us, he involves his readers, or that the readers could easily identify with the character, or with one of the characters that are being mentioned in the parables. Could that be? Let's just take it, and let's take some samples of it, so that we can have at least a view of what is Luke's style of writing, and what is this bipolar reversals that I have been talking about. Okay, the parable of the Good Samaritan, we will be dealing with that, and that is found in Luke chapter 10. So let's start with this. The only problem that I've got with the heading of the parable of the Good Samaritan is that you already know that there's a Good Samaritan. But ask a Jew, is there such a Good Samaritan? And we will be dealing with that. So seems like the title is giving away the lesson, or giving away the things just because of the title. But let us try and let us study this. So let's start with 10:25. A teacher of the law came up and tried Jesus to trap him. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to receive eternal life? And Jesus answered, what do the scriptures say? How do you interpret them? The man answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, for once. And love your neighbor as you love yourself. This one re-echoes Matthew chapter 22:37-40. And in Matthew chapter 22:37-40, the difference is that it is not the man who is saying these things. Let's just go over there. But Jesus, let's take that and take that for a little while, so that we can compare it later, okay? We'll be going to that. Matthew 22:36 down through 14. This is what is there. Teacher, he asks, which is the greatest commandment in the law? So Jesus is being asked, what is the greatest commandment in the Tanakh, in the Torah, the 5 law books? Or if you consider the entire whole New Old Testament, you will be saying the Tanakh. Jesus answered, and this is Jesus answered, love, where is it? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. In Luke, there were 4. In here, 3. And there's even this explanation of Jesus that says, this is the greatest and the most important commandment. Okay. The second most important commandment is like, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then another commentary of Jesus is that the whole law of Moses, the Torah, and the teachings of the prophets, the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim, depend on this one and this two. Depend on this two. So, when we go back to Luke, as we look at Luke, when the man answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and then the next one is, love your neighbor as you love yourself, the guy just know the answer. And so Jesus said, you're right. And so the command is, do this and you will live. But the teacher of the law wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? This is interesting. The teacher of the law wanted to justify himself. If I have to justify myself, it would be on the first commandment, right? But this particular teacher of the law has no problem with the first commandment. He has no problem loving God with all his heart, with all his mind, with all his soul, with all his strength, with all his might. He got no problem with that. He has no problem with that. The next one that he wants is, he had problem with the second one, the loving my neighbor. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Who is my neighbor? That seems to be his problem. So, just like us, you know, we have this selective, you know, we don't get along with all or every neighbor we have. And we just don't click with somebody. We just don't click. They're just some neighbors that they just don't like us, or you just, you know, things like that. And let's just use the parable. And so by having this, is that when we read Luke, seems like Luke is taking us and, hey, I could identify with him. We would like to justify ourselves and say, hey, I'm like him. So we ask, who is our neighbor? You would like to justify, okay, I could not love my neighbor as I love myself, because there are some neighbors that just, you know, and things like that. So Jesus gave him this. Instead of answering him, Jesus answered and said, there was once a man who was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Jerusalem, city on a hill. So he was going down to Jericho. And I will not be interpreting this parable as I taught you before because of our time. So I will just go on explaining it as we go along. So this particular man from Jerusalem going down to Jericho was robbed. When robbers attacked him, stripped him and beat him up, leaving him half dead. So, next one. It so happened that a priest was going down that road. Priest was going down that road. But when he saw the man, he walked on by on the other side. Wait a minute. A priest? You could easily identify a priest. Stereotyping. Must be a good guy. Must be a religious person. A priest will surely help. A priest will surely do the right thing. A religious guy, a good guy, a guy who serves God, a guy who serves at the temple, will help. But Luke said, when he saw the man, or Jesus said in his parable, when he saw the man, he walked on by on the other side. I could understand him if this priest was going up to Jerusalem, because that will be justifiable, saying that could probably be for a higher calling, because worshippers are waiting for him and a lot of people are waiting for him to attend to their needs. But he was already coming down, meaning he's not going up to offer sacrifices, to do temple duties, but he was already going down. So, let's leave him at that. In the same way, a Levite also came and went over and looked at the man and then walked on by on the other side. Another good guy. This guy came from a priestly tribe. That's not my slide. Okay, there it is. He is a temple servant. He assists the priests in doing sacrifices, in making and preparing the offerings. Again, I can understand this guy, this Levite, if he was going up, because that would be a higher calling, that would be for the temple duties. But be that as it may, Jesus said, this Levite came, he went over and looked at the man, he made sure whether the man is still alive or dead, and then he walked on by. He walked on the other side. When you look at this, the third one, but a Samaritan who was traveling that way came upon the man, and when he saw him, his heart was filled with pity. Now, Listen, because of the title that was given, the Good Samaritan, that gives out something and just throw us, off track. Samaritan. Who are these Samaritans? The Samaritans are remnants of Israel, the 10 tribes, the northern kingdom, if you could remember that. They were those who were left behind. They were those, the invalid. They were those that are not able-bodied. They were those when Assyria came down and took over the northern kingdom in 721 BC. They took the inhabitants of Samaria and brought them to another land. And they placed on their place, they replaced them with Gentiles. Those who were left behind are the weak ones, the invalid, those who are not able-bodied, the rejects, to be exact. And when the Gentiles came in as a replacement for those who have been taken out, they intermarried with these Gentiles. So they became half-breeds, half Jewish and half Gentile. They are half-breeds. In their dealing with God, they are also half-breeds. They worship Jehovah or Yahweh, and then they also worship another gods. There is this open hostility. Not only that they are hated by the Jews, well, the Jews look down on them, but there is this open hostility between the Jews and the Samaritans. Remember Jesus and the Samaritan woman? John chapter 4, and we will be dealing with that some other time. The Samaritan woman was open and reminded Jesus that she was a Samaritan. For the Jews, they are good for nothing. Let me just give you part of that. Chapter 9, look this, chapter 9, verse 51 down through 56. As the time drew near when Jesus would be taken up to heaven, he made up his mind and set out on his way to Jerusalem. He sent messengers ahead of him who went into a village in Samaria to get everything ready for him. But the people in Samaria there would not receive him because it was clear that he was on his way to Jerusalem. Look at this. The Samaritan, this is Samaritan Opposition, the Samaritans would not welcome him. They do not want Jesus to be there because it was clear that he was on his way to Jerusalem. They don't want the Jews practice their religion. They don't want the Jews, or they don't want to aid the Jews practice their religion. As simple as that. Listen, when the disciples James and John, the first two disciples, saw this, they said, "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them?" See, you could see the hostility. You could see John and James. John, when you study John, he seemed to be a very peaceful guy. But this time, he said, "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven and destroy these Samaritans?" But Jesus turned and rebuked them. Then Jesus and his disciples went on to another village. Let's go over to Luke. Let's get back to Luke. So, two good guys and the bad guy. The priests, the Levite, and then the Samaritan. Samaritans are open in their hostilities against the Jews. They just don't have a good dealing with one another. But this particular Samaritan took pity on the man. He did not even look if the man was a Jew or a Gentile, a Jew or a Samaritan. He just saw this man needing help. And so he did. He helped the guy. He went over to him, poured oil and wine on his wounds, first aid, bandaged him. Then, here's the sacrifice. He put the man on his own animal and took him to an inn where he took care of him. See, the taking care of him is not just that he put this victim to an inn, but he took care of him. He spent the whole day there taking care of the victim. He helped him and did whatever need to be done. The next day, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Take care of him," he told the innkeeper, "and when I come back this way, I will pay you whatever else you spend on him." Wow. Charge it on my account. In our present day situation, we could just say, okay, charge it on my account. Whatever expenses, just charge it on my account and I will pay you when I get back. Interesting guy. And Jesus concluded, in your opinion, which one of these 3 acted like a neighbor toward the man attacked by the robbers? And the teacher of the law answered, the one who was kind to him. Jesus replied, you go then and do the same. Teacher of the law, wanting to justify himself, asking who is my neighbor. Teacher of the law, who didn't have any problem obeying, loving God with all his heart, with all his mind, with all his soul, with all his strength, but had difficulty loving his neighbors. Teacher of the law, wanting to justify himself. Now learn the lesson from the parable of Jesus, that those who are in need and those who help are the real neighbors. In your opinion, which one of these three acted like a neighbor toward the man attacked by the robbers? The one who was kind to him. So he understood now that to be a neighbor is breaking prejudices, breaking racial barriers, breaking political views, and probably breaking religious views. Let me now just go back and use Luke's bipolar reversal. In Luke's bipolar reversal is that when the good guys become the bad guys and the bad guy become good guy, that is bipolar reversal. In the parable, the good guys, the priests and the Levite, were supposed to be, in our stereotype thinking, the good guys. They will be helping because they are religious, because they serve in the temple, because they are men of God, because they live by the law. But they turned out not helping. On the other side, the Samaritans these good-for-nothing guys, these rejects, these half-breeds, these just good-for-nothing, by Luke's example, became the good guy. That is why we remember always the Good Samaritan. That is why when someone does an extraordinary thing for others, we always think of a Good Samaritan. And that is Luke's bipolar reversal. I have prepared two more, and that will be the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son. And the other one is the Pharisee and the tax collector. But it seems to me that my time is up. So I'll just go get the... Let me just go fast forward on this. And please, if you've got time, just go over and look at the parable of the prodigal son and consider there who is really lost, the eldest or the youngest. There are a lot of bipolar reversals there. So let's just take this as, just give me 10 more minutes. The Pharisee and the tax collector, just looking at it, our stereotype thinking is that Pharisee, religious guy, that is my good guy. Tax collector, who trusts our tax collectors anyway? Okay, tax collector, the corrupt guy, that guy who, you know, that's what their problems before, the same problem now, but that is our setting for now. So, using again Luke's bipolar reversal, the good guy will become bad and the bad guy will become good. That's how easy it is. That's how simple it is. If you could get into that idea, into that thinking. So let's go over this and let me just deal with it in a couple of minutes. So, Luke chapter 18 verse 9. Jesus also told this parable to, look at this, people who were sure of their own goodness and despised everybody else. That's the setting. Once there were two men who went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. We all know Pharisee, very strict with the law and very strict in following the law. And a tax collector, we all know what a tax collector is. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, and listened to the prayer of the Pharisee. I thank you, God, that I am not greedy. Good point.